Hello, my name is Sakawis Nobis, and I'm Plains Cree Saulteaux of the George Gordon First Nation. That's in Saskatchewan, Canada, and I'm also Plains Cree. I also grew up in Winnipeg, and I live in Iowa City now. I've been here for 15 years, and I'm the founder and executive director of Great Plains Action Society, which is an Indigenous-led organization working on climate and social justice issues here in Iowa and actually around the Midwest and even all over the country. So today we decided to put this forum together specifically because we have been quite upset to see the type of reaction that is happening in Mason City and throughout Iowa concerning these racist mascots of Indigenous people. The problem with these mascots is there's a lot to it. There's a lot to this conversation, but basically it's very simple actually in the end as well. If you care about common decency in any way for your fellow human beings, then you can't treat them like a stereotype or a trope or a cartoon, which is what essentially mascots are. You can't dehumanize them, and that's exactly what mascots do. So Indigenous peoples, they deserve and they demand to be treated as fully human and not something from the past, not something that does not exist anymore, and not a toy or a plaything for white people to have fun with when they watch, their sports or whatever it is that they're doing. So we are here today to talk to many people across Iowa and even have some folks from the Mohawk Nation weigh in about this issue, so we can provide our opinions to counter the white supremacist rhetoric that's been coming out of the Keep the Name mascot group out of Mason City, and educate the public about why it's finally time to just move forward from this racist endeavor, from this problematic tradition, and be better people, be more decent to each other. We will be talking to Leanne Clausen de Mont, who started the Change the Name group in Mason City, to Trisha Etringer, who is Winnebago and the operations director of Great Plains Action Society, Edouardo Zendeja, who is a professor at the University of Nebraska and who's actually written a book on this exact topic. Jessica Engelking, who focuses on education for Great Plains Action Society. Salvi Montes-Clausen, a youth activist in Mason City, who has actually received not only the racism of this group in Mason City that is pushing back at this issue, but also this transphobia. And Alexandria Walker, one of our youth organizers with Great Plains Action Society, John Kane, who's going to provide a Mohawk perspective. John Kane runs a radio show, a really good one too. I would advise everybody to check it out, and has been also pushing back at mascots for years. And then we'll speak with Keely Driscoll, Meskwaki, who will provide a Meskwaki opinion on this and read the letter that the Meskwaki Nation recently wrote, actually, telling the state to stop using these mascots. There are 27 mascots still being used in Iowa by various schools. And so, Indigenous mascots. So we have a long way to go. Technically, the Mason City mascot has been retired, but the school board, decided to move forward with that. But this group that has come up, full of, well, basically, let's just say like white supremacist sentiment, is pushing back, and they will be attending the school board meeting on December 20th. We will be there too to speak our piece as well. And we are going to make sure that they don't bring this mascot out of retirement, bring it back. The last thing we want is white supremacy to win in this day and age. Indigenous peoples need to be heard on this topic. And it's very clear that the majority of Indigenous people do not want mascots in their likeness or of their culture anymore. And that the few people that do come forward and say that are of the minority and usually a sellout. So we'll just say that. They haven't decolonized their mind and they have a long way to go. I would like to speak to Leanne next, who has hello, Leanne, who founded the group to push back. You've been working on this for a while, right? So you are kind of integral to getting this mascot retired in the first place, but you've been experiencing a lot of other issues with that. But if you could tell us the story about the Mason City mascot, and then your opinions and your experiences, we'd appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. This is wonderful to be able to be here with you tonight, and then my son Salvi is in the background, and so yeah, we've been working on this for a couple of years, especially since I became aware that the Mohawk tribe wanted the our local high school mascot name to be replaced with something that wasn't Native American and wasn't using all the Native American symbolism or regalia or things like that.
And that's the St. Regis. That's the St. Regis Mohawk Nation.
Right. Both the St. Regis and the Akwesasne Mohawk communities had both spoken out on the issue. I've actually, just in the research that I've been able to do, the St. Regis Mohawk Tribal Council first put a statement on their website back in 2001. So that's at least 20 years ago this month, actually, saying that they did not want schools or other entities to be using their name like this. And so really, and that's really the early days of the internet. But we knew about this, people in town that graduated in 1970 knew that this was a problematic issue and that we needed to change the name. I graduated, my senior year was 1995-96. Back then, we were talking about how this needed to change, and we thought that we were going to change to the Mustangs. The baseball team here in Mason City had already become the Mustangs, and we thought the rest of the school was going to shift over that way, and didn't find out until really sometime later that they decided to go the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. And then I think it was in 2011 that the Iowa Commission on Native American Affairs came out with one of those advisory memos saying, please stop using, especially white people that are dressed up in costumes that look like Native Americans to be your physical mascots. And at that time, our football coach, John Lee, he has a right-wing TikTok channel and so forth. He concocted this thing where he says he called up the St. Regis Mohawk tribe and he tried to create, in his words, a prototype Native American mascot that they would be willing to get behind. And they said, no, thank you. And so then the story, as he tells it, is that, well, they said they just didn't want to be involved, but oh, well, whatever, And so what he says happened is that they just kind of acquiesced and said that they could just go on using the name, but just not to have a person like running around with a tomahawk, and so it's just kind of a story that defies, sensibility. And I think because there's absolutely zero written documentation about this, pretty much the whole town was fooled. But there was no way to verify that this phone conversation ever even happened. And it's completely inconsistent with what the Mohawk tribal leadership has been saying for decades on this issue. So finally, there has been some exposure that this story that the football coach has been running around telling everybody just never really happened, and that... And some of the other coaches went, and I think what actually caused the school board to be willing to consider changing the name is that we are building this giant, very expensive athletic complex right now. And they hired like a professional rebranding logo, marketing company to come through. And at this time, some of the coaches were repeating that story about how we had permission and we need to go all in and really, really embrace this Native American mascot and make it even more prominent. And that's when people finally said, okay, yeah, but where's the documentation that that's actually what they want? And so the school board contacted the tribe and heard back, actually not within, within a very short period of time, that actually definitively.
It was 1 week.
Yeah. That this was not at all what they wanted. No, they didn't want to compromise. No, they didn't want any sort of.
Yeah, I think the question is, can we partner with you on the mascot?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the coach's own language. Right. Exactly. And the answer was no. And so, and that's really, I think, what really drove the school board to say, okay, fine, time to switch. Was that the assertions being made by the coaches and then finding out that the tribes actually wanted something completely different, And so I had tried to approach the school board on this issue about 5 years ago. That's when the football coach wrote me and said, this is what he had done. And so we kept copies of that communication. And but the school board did not want to even bring it up. It was just a non-starter with them. I think it really was the coaches and what they were saying that really caused this to move forward. Plus just that construction timeline, because they want to have things, I think, engraved in the walls and in the seats and in everything else. So they really have to come to a decision about this branding process. So there's that part. And the decision was unanimous. It was, it was properly communicated through all the public communication channels of our local newspaper, our TV station.
And we have about 3 to 4 minutes left.
Oh, sure.
To speak. But so I was hoping that we could also talk about what's been happening
since then, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now what we have is, so there was about 24 hours of just kind of relief and breathing space that this had all just happened, and then within a very short period of time, the Save the Mascot group formed. It right away attracted a lot of attention from our local, bigots, the white supremacy movement, people who are trying to ban LGBTQ books from our school libraries and public libraries. It kind of became, attractive to the school board members who were really trying to get rid of things like, they're campaigning.
With the ban on CRT, this fits right in, doesn't it?
Right. The ban on CRT, that's them.
Critical race theory for folks out there don't know what we're talking about.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And this has been, terrorizing the school board members and other Native Indigenous families that are here in town, mine and the other Native and Indigenous people that spoke up at the last board meeting on November 15th when this was decided. And they've been coming after us with all sorts of nasty comments. They've been saying, show up at school board members' houses at 11 o'clock at night and make them listen to you and make them change that vote. And these things, horrible things that they're saying, including, outing my 12-year-old as a transgender person, in this group, and publishing the names and the faces of all the school board members and saying they didn't graduate from here, and so forth. Right. And it's only just after this last incident of outing a transgender student, that there was any accountability for them whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so I think there was like a one line, oh, hey, sorry, I'm working on it, apology from the owner of the group. Hey, there we go. And they may or may not be removing the objectionable material. They may or may not be removing the people who have been promoting hate in the group. But what they have done is taken the group private so that there's really no accountability now.
Yeah, so I was just kicked off as we were speaking. I was just kicked out of the group. So I posted a informational series of graphics that we put together yesterday. I'm actually going to show everybody right now
please do.
These graphics. So we put these together. I put these together yesterday. I posted them on Great Plains' platforms. Mm-hmm. And I'm just responding to some of the messages or the comments that they've been making. So one comment is, the pro keep the name Mohawk side must view itself as the righteous cavalry, which by definition means that the other side will be the Indians. These people are too racist to even fully commit to their Indian mascot cause. Like, they consider themselves the cavalry in this fight to maintain a native mascot. Tell me, that is insane. My goodness. Right. So this is a very good example of white supremacist sentiment. And then we have this other issue right here where they are basically putting us in the same category as animals.
Yeah.
If they take away this, then what's going to happen next? We're going to take away bulldogs, eagles, lions. No, that's not going to happen because those are not, human beings. So the dehumanizing nature of mascots is very loud and clear in that sentiment right there. We have another comment. I say everyone that is a Mason City Mohawk get a Mohawk haircut and protest outside the administration building by Roosevelt. So, and I apologize because I'm sure John will correct me later, but it's pronounced Kahnawake, and I know that there's a Kahnawake Mohawk as well, so I don't know if I'm saying this right, but that's the name of the nation. That's not the colonized term Mohawk, how they actually refer to themselves, and they are made up of many unique tribes and cannot be defined by a single hairstyle. So that's an issue. And then just imagine all of these white folks getting a Mohawk haircut. The appropriation of that in itself.
So I find it. Can I say something?
There's this other comment right here. We are Mohawks, and we will not let our pride, culture, and history be destroyed from people who aren't even from here. So my comment to that is Grant Peterson's comment is a shining example of how history has been whitewashed, and white supremacists are quick to ignore that they should not put on indigenous identities like a cosplay costume, not to mention that they are actually the outsiders stealing and perverting indigenous identities while squatting on stolen land. And then we have here, of course, like the Mohawk Nation itself has provided, their opinion on this, and they've said no. And there's people like us within the state saying no. The school board is saying no, but they don't want to listen because really, in the end, they don't want to listen. So that's the problem. But so I wanted to show people what you've been dealing with.
Yeah, it's been frustrating. I just noticed that one of our other guests might have to leave early. We can stick around if you want to.
I will get you back on if we can.
Okay.
And next we will bring up Trisha to speak. And where is Trish? There you are, Trish. We'll bring up Trisha to say a few words. Hi, Trish.
Hi, everyone. Hello, it's been a while. I am just some of the comments that were made already. It's very triggering, but at the same time, it's like, it's 2021 and I still can't believe like natives are still going through this. So I found out about this, I think either you shared it or someone else shared it. I just remember seeing it. I think you shared it. And this isn't just Mason City. We've also had to kind of speak our piece at Indianola because they had Indians too as their mascot. so what I wanted to say real quick, while being on here is, mascots, they may not be, something, that I keep hearing namesake, like this is our namesake, this is honoring us, and this is this, and it's something that, no, it's not honoring us, it's not
We can
respecting
decide
us.
what honors us.
Yes, and then not only that, if you're having tribal nations that that are directly affected from this, telling you to stop, then stop doing that. It's that simple. It's not, you know, um, we have a lot of these supporters, may follow, may not, they may or may not follow, but I'm gonna guess that, when it comes to wearing a mask at school, or when it comes to women's rights, they get all in the tizzy fit. But when it comes to natives actually saying, hey, this is culturally appropriating our culture, and this isn't honoring us, then it's not a big deal. Then it's not, they don't put it as a big deal. Like we don't know how to speak for ourselves, and we do know how to speak for ourselves. And maybe this is the first time that they've heard, natives actually, or maybe not, it may not be, but more or less, it's just, it's frustrating, because I know what it's like to be the only Native girl going to an all-white school, or I should say PWI, predominantly white institution, and not really having that connection to my hometown or my home tribe, until I got older, and not really understanding. So to me, yeah, this is a big deal, because I've actually lived through it. I know what it's like. I live through this every day. And I think, at the end of it all, these are, for the most part, I feel like the supporters in that group are all adults, and they're going to have their way and their say, or whatever, have your little page. It's cool, whatever. But at the end of the day, the Iowa public education system does have a ban on CRT. So if they're going to take that angle, then they shouldn't have any mascots that related to any race at all.
Absolutely.
If that's the case.
Yeah, because Kim Reynolds says that they put this ban on critical race theory in effect because they want people to be judged on their character, and not their race or their gender, or their sex. Well, like essentially we are judging Indigenous people by their race with mascots.
Yep. Right. And then it's just, I'm tired of hearing, oh, this is honoring us, and your name's going to be erased if we don't do this. First and foremost, it's not going to do anything. We've been here, we've always been here, and we will continue to be here. We don't need somebody to go and say, oh, this is honoring you. No, it's not honoring us. If you want to honor us, support Indigenous business, support Indigenous artists, support Indigenous musicians, go to powwows, do that. I totally get it. There's got to be some kind of line to draw, but I mean, it's frustrating. So that's all I wanted to say. I know that Edouardo wants to
Edouardo actually, and I feel so bad because I didn't see Edouardo's message in here, because I'm trying to do it all right now. So Edouardo had to leave, but we do have an academic with us. We have Jess, who's been reading about CRT for a while and has got a lot of good insight on mascots, so we'll have her fill in. But I know you said you want to be there on December 20th for the school board meeting. So,
and I have been following that group. I have been following
I just got kicked out today.
I don't appreciate, because the group rules, I know that some of our close friends and circle have been on there, and they haven't been swearing, they haven't been doing that, and still they got blocked.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Why is that? If that conversation is uncomfortable to you, then you need to address that. We shouldn't be made feel uncomfortable.
No.
So
no,
yeah.
I happily put those graphics in there today, and then got kicked out right after. Yeah. So, all right, Trish, thanks for being with us, and I will see you later.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so Next, we're going to bring Jess on stage, and we unfortunately lost Edouardo, but I'm very happy that we have Jess to weigh in, from an academic perspective, and just have more conversation about the lack of critical race theory involved with all of this and why that's so important. I'm going to add you to the stream, but Jess, I think you have to turn on your. Yep, there we go.
All right. Okay.
Greetings from the Christmas corner.
The solstice corner.
Solstice dance.
All right. So, Jess, if you could just, give us your perspective on like the Not Your Mascots movement, and the movement in general that's been developing and getting very strong over the past few years across the country, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, well, this is a movement that's been happening since before I was born. As Trish said earlier, like it gets really tiring to have to keep, going over these things again and again and again. But you mentioned the CRT ban in Iowa, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about what maybe we're missing by not getting that framework. And so much of the framework of CRT situates what's going on now within the context of actual history, which in this country is incredibly racist. And so that was one of the explicit bans in the law that get passed. The government can't make claims that either the United States or Iowa is systematically or fundamentally racist. And well, the thing is, it is. That is the history of this country. And so not having that framework doesn't give us the language that could better help us understand some of these issues. So one issue I've been noticing is this idea that people can identify as however they want. And over the past few years, in a lot of good ways, we've expanded and extended our concepts to take on new meaning and include new people. Trans women are women. And a lot of people think that that is solely a function of whether or not a person identifies that way. And with critical race theory, we can kind of talk about how that's not sufficient for identification, right? Because whatever self-identifying you're doing within the context of an actual, history. And so when we look at something like trans identity and supposedly transracial identity, a lot of people want to go, well, look, they're the same. They're just, people identifying how they choose to identify, and we need to respect that. And that's not true, because if we look at something like with gender identity, the inequality there doesn't track historically in the way that inequality tracks historically with race. So when we have the conceptual framework to talk about stuff like, given the inherent racism of this country, inability has tracked generationally through race in ways that it hasn't through sexuality or other things. So when people want to be like, oh, we can just identify as whatever, it's like, no, we have to look at more things than just, how a person chooses to identify. And if they're identifying does more harm than good, then maybe we need to reconsider, whether or not they should be identifying that way. And in the case of people taking on racial identities, pretending you're playing Indian, that has more harm than good.
There's a history.
There's a history of it, and it's harmful. And so if we had, the framework of critical race theory, we'd have more of the language to talk about why things are the way they are, why there are these this apparent asymmetry between people can identify as a gender other than what they're assigned at birth. Shouldn't people be able to identify as a race other than what they're assigned at birth? And it's like no, because fundamentally the racism of this country has created situations where that identification isn't in the best interest of anyone.
Playing Indian is so ingrained within the culture of this country. I mean, there's a book written about it. It's literally called Playing Indian. It's written by Philip Deloria, the son of Vine Deloria, one of our greatest scholars. And I would really, encourage people to check this out. Check out the Not Your Mascots website and Facebook and Twitter pages. And there's even a documentary coming out like very shortly. It's in production right now called Imagining the Indian, the Fight Against Native American Mascotting. I'm really looking forward to that because I think it's going to provide education at a level that is obviously, people can easier. It's easier to to watch and instead of read, I guess. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out. And this is all connected to monuments to white supremacy, to racist names like Squaw Creek, which was just changed here in Iowa, a few months ago, I think. So this is a huge problem. It's not just about mascots, right? Jess?
Yeah, no, I mean, the mascots are a part of, the much deeper white supremacy functioning, at the heart of all these systems. And so, again, with the Kirkore's theory, when we have the framework to talk about how stuff in this country functions to uphold white supremacy, then we can describe why do these people need their mascots? It's because Indigenous people need to be continuously dehumanized for us to be exploited the way we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Indigenous identity is complicated, but it's ours, and it doesn't belong to white people. And I know white people hate being told they can't do things, but you can't just say you're Mohawks when the actual Mohawks are saying, please knock that off. You can say, I'm Indigenous, and, expect to, I don't know, be.
This is a white privileged endeavor that these folks have created out there in Mason City with their little group. It's basically, this is how I see it. This is a bunch of very privileged snowflakes having a fit. Mm-hmm. They're having something taken from them on land that is stolen in the first place, and they just don't like it. They don't like having things taken from them because they are so used to getting what they want, how they want it, and who cares about anybody else. I mean, in the end, too, we haven't really talked about Christianity, but that's created the narcissistic, individualistic type of society that we have, and the consumer capitalism, consuming whatever you want, wherever you want, right? Because it's all there for everybody to take. It doesn't matter what happens to other people. It doesn't matter what kind of effect it has.
Yeah, I mean, so much of, maintaining white supremacy is maintaining our inability to say no. So if we can start saying no, then the systems start falling apart. So we can't say no even to something as little as, don't have a mascot, because we can't challenge white supremacy in that way. Mm-hmm. But we are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you weighing in on this. Next up, we will have Salvi and Leanne back on stage, and we will have a conversation with them. Salvi in particular. Oh, there you are, Leanne. Sorry. Okay. Hi. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Second.
I want to
you
say
ready?
thank you. Oops. Hold on. Let me turn my sound back up. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Me and Jess are in the same room together, so we're having to turn our computers up. And down.
Sure. We're just going to share a computer here.
I want to say thank you to Salvi for coming. I know this might be a little difficult, so I want to say thank you for the courage, and for all the good stuff you've been doing out there, for standing up for what's right. Hi.
I kind of
It's okay.
I kind of wanted to have a beer alone to myself right now.
Oh,
So,
well, this is
full
the
screen?
time to talk.
Full screen to myself. Full screen to myself.
Oh, you want me to get out of the way?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm really sorry.
That's okay. No problem. Here, stand up for a second.
It's okay. It's nothing against.
Sorry.
It's nothing against you. Okay.
No problem. Go for it.
Thank you for being here, Salvi. Do you want to tell us a little bit about being the youth organizer on this job here out there in Mason City?
Strange.
Yeah, I could imagine. I know that some of these adults have not been very nice to
I've
you.
never seen so many people attack one kid before.
Yeah, you know what? We are going to stand by you.
I know. And that's fine because I don't really care about them. And why do I have to necessarily when I don't see them in person?
Yeah. So what happened? What's it been like to help organize with your mama on this change the name?
I'm really close to my mom, so it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And fun, I guess. Because, well, I don't know. My mom told me that she was so worried because I was standing next to the two I don't know. Two nastiest people in that room who I don't know are.
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, though.
Well, it's okay. You're not hurting anybody's feelings when you're telling the truth.
Yeah, I am, because, well, sometimes the truth hurts, and
I meant on here. Nobody's going to be hurt on here. Telling the truth is definitely, yeah, it can hurt. The truth can be uncomfortable. It can be hard. Yeah. And I think that these adults, I think they don't want to hear the truth. What do you think?
I just think they were, raised to this one drawing, and the fact that it's being taken away due to discriminatory ideology, then they're like, you can't take away the drawing. What else are you gonna take away? The haircut? And I'm like, no. Don't you see in most of our pictures we have braids? Why would we take that away? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Anyways.
No, it's I think what you're trying to say is they don't
I'm
know.
really sorry for the no relation. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's been so many others stuff on top of that and on top of stuff that doesn't even matter to the mascot change.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. They've been being transphobic. They've been being anti-LGBTQIA. They've been extremely hostile and racist to Indigenous people. And I'm sure BIPOC people as well. So I understand that it's more than just the mascot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. And you have a really good mom.
With all of this mascot thing, I don't think it's really... You shouldn't really make a mascot based off, a person or people. The alternative would be animals, and I've been drawing for, 7 years since preschool? I don't know. But that's why I wanted to make drawings to think of something else. Just to...
Yeah. It'd be great to talk to the kids about what they think a mascot should be.
It was more of, I was going to choose between 3 animals of me drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would let the school children vote on whatever that.
That is a really great idea. Maybe that's the next part of this process is talking to the youth of Mason City and finding out what they would like.
Yeah.
Well, I really hope that none of these people continue to bother you, and if they do, we're here with you. And we're so glad you have such an amazing mom there doing this good work as well. So I hope we can talk again. Thank you for being here with us.
I'm sorry if it made no sense.
You made lots of sense. You made perfect sense. Thank you.
Just Maybe next time, if you don't want people to hate you, maybe actually understand the racist history behind mascots and don't attack a 12-year-old child.
Yes, very well said. That is perfect. Thank you. That is perfect. I'm going to quote you on that. Thank you. I hope you have a good evening.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye. That was extremely well said. The children always have, in my opinion, the best remarks. There's a saying that I learned from an elder not too long ago, a few years ago. He said that we should listen to the children and the elders because everybody in between is just confused. So, and speaking of youth, I'm going to bring Alexandria Walker up on stage. Alexandria is our youth organizer with Great Plains Action Society, one of our youth organizers. And we're just glad to have her here today to weigh in. And Alexandria, can you introduce yourself, like what nation you're from and all those other things?
Of course. Hinikaragi, Chakshab Hingairina. My name is Alexandria Walker, but my spirit name is Golden Eagle Woman. I am from the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, but I am also Oglala Lakota, and I am Sac and Fox. I'm a student at the University of Nebraska, Omaha right now, and I'm heading into my senior year, so I've done quite a lot of learning. I wanted to say thank you to Salvi and Leanne for coming on stage and talking about their stories and their problems that are going on over in Mason City. You and your mother are both very, very powerful people. And Salvi, I wanted to thank you for being here, especially for sharing your struggle. As a seventh generation, we're doing things that our ancestors would have wanted us to do. So it's very important that you, I, Keely, any other youth that is here today, school is supposed to be a place where we're safe and we're protected from the outside places or forces. But the stuff that happened with you and the school board, that's not something that should have happened. And by doing that, they're denying you your identity and who you are, whereas school should express and enhance the expression of children and their selves. They should be their true selves there is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, and it's not really just the school board, it's this group.
Yes.
This Save the Name group that's come about, that's been causing a lot of friction and supporting, white supremacist and anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ sentiment. Yep.
Yeah. But children your age, 12-year-olds, they should never have to deal with that. And I like what you said, is that the truth hurts, especially when it's children speaking about it. We kind of want to do that, not break their hearts on the truth, but just tell them, hey, this is what's going on and you need to wake up. So I really admire what you said about that. And especially as youth doing it, it's so powerful and you're so brave for what you did. I had a little bit of experience myself, Native mascots and all. When I was a student over in Whiting, Iowa for a little while, their mascot was, I think it was the Warriors. And their logo was a Native American person. So I was only there for, I think, about 6 to 8 months. As far as I know, I don't know if they've changed it, but it's hard to see that and know that you're the only person in there that can identify with the pain you're feeling when you see that image on the wall or on the floor of the gym. So I just wanted to thank you again for speaking up.
Well, thank you, Alex. We know this is really difficult. This is a lot of emotional labor, actually. Mm-hmm. I don't know if people fully understand how hard this is for Indigenous people to have to deal with this all the time, everywhere. I started fighting mascots 15 years ago. Chief, and I could never get his name right. Ilianaiwik. Does somebody know how to pronounce? I've never been able to pronounce it, but there was like effigies of Indigenous people that they were hanging in trees to show how upset they were about these things. And we were youth at the time. Like we were like, university students running the Native American Student Center, and we were getting hate mail and all sorts of stuff sent our way because we were trying to stop this really racist mascot from continuing in Illinois. And so, that's been retired, thank goodness. But that was a really, like, I don't know if y'all know what this guy did. Like the mascot would go out and dance and wear regalia. It was really bad. So, we're making movement. We've seen the Redskins be, taken off. We're seeing movement on some other mascots. But let's be honest, there are hundreds and hundreds of these mascots left in the country. Like I said, Iowa has 27 alone that still exist right now. And that's not counting the one right now that we're fighting, which is up in the air. So technically, could be 28. Again, Indianola, we've been working on this issue in Indianola for a while. We thought there was good movement happening within the school board, but since critical race theory was banned, there's been a lot of right-wing racists running for school board because they feel very emboldened by the ban on critical race theory. And they won, because that's what I was turning into. Now the Indianola group is like, oh, well, too bad. We got 3 new white supremacists here on board. So we're okay now. We're good. So Alex, I just want to say, like, thank you. Thank you for being a youth and for standing up for what's right.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Well, I'm going to say goodbye, Alex, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we're going to bring up next John Kane. And I am so happy that you are here with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope, can you hear all right? Is everything, the sound good?
It sounds really good. I got to get a mic like that.
Well, this is kind of what I do. So,
yes.
So I'm equipped.
Yes. I would like to just tell the audience that John's been doing this work for quite some time, fighting mascots, and just working on all sorts of Indigenous issues. And he hosts a really wonderful radio show that you should check out. It's,
Resistance Radio is my radio show, which
That's
is
the
in
radio show. Yeah.
in Washington. My podcast is Let's Talk Native.
That's it. Sorry. Yes.
Yep.
So I've listened to both of them, and they're wonderful, and you can learn a lot by tuning in. And John is here to provide, basically a Mohawk perspective. And I don't even know if we should use the term Mohawk, but I'm using it because our audience might not understand, like what the term is that we should be using. And if you could enlighten us, that'd be great.
Well, we have to use the word Mohawk because that's kind of centered to the discussion in the first place. We got a bunch of white people calling themselves Mohawk, but the more accurate term for Mohawk people is Gahaga. It means the people of the land of Flint. There's a lot of question about the etymology of the word Mohawk. There's some suggestion that it may have Dutch influence. Certainly, it may have Huron influence, but it's not. It's not what we called ourselves. It's what we got labeled, and that kind of gets to the core problem that mascots represent. We have our identity is essentially been co-opted by white people. It starts with Hollywood, and well, actually, even before Hollywood, it starts with newspaper writers, magazine writers who love to tell stories about Native people. One of the things that that we hear all the time is that if we aren't used as mascots, we will like be erased or something, and I've got to clear that up because the mascots are the erasure, and I think it's important that people understand what I mean by that. When these schools decided they were going to call themselves Indians, warriors, Mohawks, savages, whatever, Red Raiders, Redskins, they were redefining who we were. They never took any honest look at who we were as a people. And I trace some of that foundation laid for this to a well-recognized storyteller, a guy by the name of L. Frank Baum. He wrote the wonderful Wizard of Oz. If you're not familiar with him, I'm sure you're familiar with the story, the movie, whatever. L. Frank Baum, he was actually born in central New York, near Syracuse, New York, a little town called Chittenango. He went on to be a newspaper editor in Aberdeen, Dakota Territory before it was a state. And he wrote what we now call the BAUM, and it's BAUM, in case you want to look it up, BAUM Genocide Editorials. And the first one he wrote right after the death of Sitting Bull. And what he did was he called for our extermination. And I'll read just an excerpt of it, because as he was praising, the death of this, great warrior, essentially almost twisting that the only good Indian's a dead Indian thing to mean the good Indians are dead, where some of that expression means the only way we're good is when we're dead. But that was the kind of view he had. But he called for our extermination. And here's what he said. He said, the whites, by law of conquest, by justice of civilization, are masters of the American continent, and the best safety of the frontier settlements will be secured by the total annihilation of the few remaining Indians. Why not annihilation? Their glory has fled, their spirit broken, their manhood effaced. Better they die than live the miserable wretches that they are. History would forget these latter despicable beings and speak in later ages of the glory of these grand kings of the forest and plain that Cooper, James Fenimore Cooper, loved to heroism. Now, the reason I bring this up in the mascot discussion is because this is what they've done. They've ignored who we are because, look, they hated us. They always hated us, and they still hate us. But they love the idea of a continent that is somehow wrestled away from Europe, and then even as they wrestled it away from us, that they could hang on to the noble character that they would have loved to assign to us and then turn around and assign it to themselves. So when they adopt these mascots, they aren't honoring us. They are actually ignoring any semblance of history. And what they're doing is they're recrafting, like Hollywood did, like James Fenimore Cooper did, like L. Frank Baum did, another narrative about us being these noble savages, these grand kings of the forest and plain. Why? Not for us, but for them. So this whole idea is to erase who we really were and then recreate an image of who they can say we were that they can claim for themselves. So, and I know it shouldn't be that complicated, but that's really what this is about. This is about them claiming characteristics that for themselves, not really projecting those characteristics on us as a people. Because like I said, even L. Frank Baum, and by the way, if you're wondering when he wrote this in 1890, about 9 days before the massacre at Wounded Knee, which is right about now in the time. I think the editorial came out on December 20th, ironically, right? And then the massacre, I think, was on the 29th. So this is his asking and calling for our extermination. Did the massacre happen because of it? Well, it certainly didn't not happen because of what he wrote. So I think it's important that people understand this. Now, the other thing that I try to bring up, and look, and we all have a lot of good reasons for fighting this thing. But the other thing is when we talk about white kids playing Indians, and not just white kids, because obviously most of this fight comes from their parents who peaked in high school and seem to have no life worth fighting for other than what they.
I know, like I'm thinking about if you have to identify as Mohawk to feel good about yourself, what is going on?
Well, but here's
I'm not trying to be rude when I say that. I'm actually really wondering.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But here's the biggest problem with it. While these white schools, and especially if you go back in time, because many of them say, well, we adopted this mascot 70, 80, 90 years ago. Well, at that same time, up until as late as the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, while white kids were encouraged to play Indian as a part of school, Native kids were being ripped from their homes, ripped from their communities, ripped from their nations, and sent to these prisons that they called schools, residential schools, where they were beaten for their identity, where their identity was stolen from them. So while white kids could claim Native identity, Native kids were having it ripped from them. The policy was kill the Indian, save the man. And children did die. I make no mistake about it. Children died.
We are now unearthing many bodies in mass graves.
Well, and I would argue that every child died some, because that was the whole idea. The whole object was to kill the Indian in them. Yeah. And if you lost the whole body, well, then you were successful because you killed the Indian. But and to your point, as news was breaking about these mass and unmarked graves on the Canadian side, and let's be clear, there were far more residential schools and far more children in them on the US side than on the Canadian side. But Canada already went through what they called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which lacked both truth and reconciliation. And part of the truth that they hid was they refused to really investigate how many children died in these schools. Right now, the numbers are ticking up as many of these native territories have hired engineers to come in with ground penetrating radar, because nobody's going to go through and just dig up ground. I mean, it would be insensitive to do so. So they're using ground penetrating radar, and the numbers are coming in at just under 8,000 kids that have died. And this is current news. Now, and here's my point. You would think that as the news cycle is putting out all of these numbers about children who died in schools merely for being Native people and imprisoned in these schools so they could take away their identity, you would think anybody with a conscience would say, yeah, it's pretty, it doesn't make sense for us to call ourselves Indians. It doesn't make sense for us to call ourselves Mohawks or Warriors or Redskins. But these people are so insensitive and so belligerent in their stands on this thing that they can't even recognize the horrors that children went through because of their identity, but rather they are still trying to revel in the idea that they as children and still as adults want to insist on playing Indian and claiming these.
And I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
What if there was a mascot right now that exhibited, Black characteristics or like likeness or about Black culture, not just Black culture, Latino, Latina, Muslim, I'm thinking of other oppressed groups around the country, right?
You don't even have to go. What would you use for a white mascot?
White mascot. But I'm just saying, like, it's so bad. This country has really tried to bury the Indigenous identity so hard that we are, for some reason, I don't know why, the only group that they give a pass to allow these like racist.
Blackface is no longer tolerable. I mean, and there's not a law against. There's no law against it. I mean, they actually don't ban the N-word according to the FCC because, but there are many broadcast networks. There are many media outlets that will not print the N-word. But to your point, I posted a meme that I drafted up once that said, I certainly hope that none of you folks who think calling yourselves the R word honors Native people ever decide to honor Black people, because I don't know what word you would use, and I don't know what image you would use. But even to further the point, I have a shirt that I've got a picture of Donald Trump in the middle of it, and it's written in the same,
Caucasians.
No, worse than that. I got one called the Aryans.
Oh, yeah, I have a Caucasian one.
Yeah, the Caucasian. Mine's a singular thing. I mean, I had it made up specific custom shirt, but it says Aryans, and why not Aryans? Aryans isn't an insult.
Yeah, I mean,
it actually promotes this idea of superiority. That's what you would want for your football team, but of course they won't do that. And even though there's probably a whole lot of people in Mason City who would love to call themselves Aryans and have Donald Trump as their mascot or their image, but of course they won't do it because they know it's inappropriate.
It's dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing, and they don't want to dehumanize themselves.
The dehumanization is a big part of it, but the other thing is, look, there are 90% of the schools in the United States don't teach anything about Native history past the 1800s. So we are relegated as objects of the past. All these mascots have images of 19th century natives, or 18th century natives.
That's why we need critical race theory, but we don't have it.
Well, here's the reality. Critical race theory has never been taught in high school.
Exactly. Yep.
It's only critical race theory was taught in some college law courses to distinguish and to exemplify and to point out the role that racism has played in the shaping of legislation. That's what critical race theory is. That's the function of it. When the expression in the core study was established, it was established so they could point out the role that racism played, and it's easy to point out certain things. Obviously, you think about sentencing guidelines and that kind of thing, how crack cocaine would cause people to be locked up for a longer period of time than regular straight cocaine. I mean, that's an example, but there's obviously a ton of examples of how racism has affected legislation, especially legislation that was passed to as far as crime and punishment, justice system and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But what's happened is white people have tagged critical race theory as anything that is taught that could promote white guilt, that could make a white person feel like that something in their history is shameful. And of course, plenty of their history is shameful. I mean, slavery and genocide, are the two that come to mind. And it starts from day one. The rape culture that came with Christopher Columbus is documented. Again, I have a video called Columbus in His Own Words, and by all means, I encourage you to take a listen and take a look. Mm-hmm. I mean, it documents some of his own men talking about being given young Native girls by Christopher Columbus.
Trigger warning too for everybody out there. This is hard stuff to talk about.
Well, and you're right, and just because something is difficult to talk about doesn't mean it shouldn't be talked about. And
no, absolutely. No, we should be talking about it. I'm just trying to put that trigger warning out there for folks that might get
well, and here's the thing. I always try to connect the mascot issue, because anytime somebody says, well, is that the biggest issue? No, it's not. It may not by itself be the biggest issue, but it's connected to everything. Think about this. The over fetishizing of Native people, and including what Hollywood has done, what Disney's done, the over sexualization of Pocahontas with a high skirt and the bare shoulder and the whole bit. This fetishizing in Native people has a direct connection to the fact that 1 in 3 Native people will be raped or sexually assaulted in their lifetime. 1 in 3. Yeah. That's 5 times greater than anybody else, than any other group of people. Not just 5 times greater than white people. I mean, it's far more than that. But this is
I mean, the DOJ. Yep.
No, go ahead.
Terrible. No, I was going to say DOJ says 56% of Native women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. But when you talk to grassroots organizers, that number is actually much higher in our community.
Well, that's why I say 1 in 3. I mean, so it's actually one, because a lot of stuff is unreported, obviously. But they say 1 in 3 Native women will be raped or sexually assaulted in their lifetime. I mean, and that's an incredible number. I connect this to missing and murdered Indigenous women. I connect this to the mental health problems. I connect this to the suicide rate. I connect it to all of this stuff. And look, that's just me as a Mohawk, as a Gunyagahaga saying this. But every psychological association, including the American Psychological Association, including the New York Association of School Psychologists, have said this is wrong. It's harmful to Native and non-Native children, and they all promote a ban. So you've got every Native organization, legitimate ones. I'm not talking about that group of clowns they call themselves Naga. Every legitimate Native organization, has condemned this. And look, I even have a problem with places like Florida. With Florida State calling themselves the Seminoles. I don't care if they got permission from the Seminoles in Florida. The Seminoles in Oklahoma absolutely oppose this, and they are a much larger group, by the way. But think about what Florida State does. They ride out a white boy on a horse, and he throws a spear into the football field during the football games. The Seminoles were not a horse culture. I mean, it is so absurd that it goes beyond just the idea that you could poke fun at it. I mean, it's clearly insulting. And look, and if some of the leadership down in Seminole country in Florida think that that's okay, well, it's not okay with the rest of us. I mean, because even if they are somebody in Seminole territory in Florida is okay with this kind of mockery, the rest of us aren't. So I even have a problem with it there. But this group calling themselves the Guardians, their whole purpose of their whole reason for existence is to oppose Native people, and they try to twist it. Say, "Oh no, this is all liberal snowflakes fighting this." No, it's Native people that are leading this. We've been doing it for over 50 years, and here's the other thing I want to be clear: we are not a bunch of weak, whining individuals. We are empowered, and we're actually winning this thing. You mentioned the Washington football team dropping its name, the Cleveland baseball team dropping its name. These things happened not because all of a sudden the owners of these organizations grew a conscience. They dropped them because in the wake of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, this call for social justice, all of a sudden financial interests start saying, look, we're not sure we can keep supporting these racist names. Look, I mean, Washington was able to persevere in their trademark battle, not because of the merits of their case. The only reason Washington was able to persevere in their ability to keep the trademark was because a rock band, are you familiar with this one? There was a rock band, and they were Asian American, and they called themselves the Slants, and they wanted to copyright the word slants as the name. And look, so they wanted to copyright the word, and so the same thing that was barring that was working against Washington calling themselves a slur was working against an Asian rock group calling themselves a slur for Asians. So since they persevered, and they really apologized. I mean, I got to tell you, this group really came out and apologized to Native people because they knew that the unintended consequence of them wanting to use a slur that they could own and turn around, almost turn it around on people, turned into empowering a team like Washington to continue to mock Native people with their slur. So that's the only reason they persevered. But keep in mind, nobody ever said what Washington was using wasn't still a slur. They said, yes, it's a slur and it's offensive, but they wouldn't strip away the trademark. That's the only reason they persevered. But that doesn't mean that Nike and Walmart and Amazon and FedEx didn't say, yeah, we have a problem with this. And so that's the reason they changed it. And we became the beneficiary of some of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm greatly appreciative of that. And that's why, I in turn, and that's not the only reason, but I in turn support what they do too, because
we have to stand in solidarity. Everybody, that's exactly what we have been doing and we will continue to do. Working in solidarity with these communities all over the country, all of these oppressed communities, Asian Americans, the Black community, the Muslim community, like we all are dealing with some very serious stereotyping. I want to respond quickly to Lynn Tillman, who says that, why are we bringing Black folks into this conversation? I'm doing that because I'm talking about the solidarity that we need. And I also wanted to point out that for some reason, not for some reason, we know the reason. It's the whitewashing and the genocide and the fact that this country does not want to do anything about the erasure of Indigenous peoples and the stereotyping of them, much, much more so than anybody else in this country that we need to discuss. And we need to show people that it's happening specifically to Indigenous people. And it's happening because of wanting to erase us from the social landscape. We cannot speak up. We cannot have strong voices. Otherwise, that pushes back at their agenda to own the land and the resources. Because that's what it comes back down to.
And they're white privilege. They're white privilege. Yes, I mean, absolutely. Look, and to be clear, there's no question that racism has played a big role in how Americans treat Black people and how they treat Native people historically, all the way, from slavery and genocide to taking of our scalps for bounties. There's no question. But there's also no question that some of how we have experienced racism has been different. Like I said, everybody knows that blackface is wrong. Nobody would, nobody dons blackface, and when they do get caught,
they get called out. Yeah,
they get called out, and then they have to do damage control. So there's still white people who want to do blackface. There's no question about it. And
they still do. We're actually dealing with an issue like that right here in Iowa City right now.
But the general reaction is some level of condemnation. But Native people, like as you said earlier, there's this exception. I mean, you can still buy, a Halloween costume and usually something kind of slutty and something, sexualized, at a costume store.
Yeah, like it's fully embraced by the corporate industry. It's fully embraced by the government. I mean, it's being used by like huge sports teams. It's prominent everywhere we look. It's prominent in the news, in the media. This I don't want to say it, but the red word, right? The R word is just like it's okay to use that word, and we need to change that.
And to be clear, even though the way Black people and Native people experience racism is a little different, those who are expressing that racism are the same. It's white people. I mean, anytime I always hear white people say, "Oh, you're racist for bringing it up." Well, no, you don't understand what racism is. Racism is about power. It's about superiority and the superiority inferiority dynamic. So if you are a people of the dominant culture and you can adjust the rules, rules that allow things like native mascots, if you can adjust the rules of society so you can permit this kind of racist behavior, that's what racism is. It's about having the power to control the systems. That's why racism is considered systemic. It's because it's built in to the institutions that allow it, all controlled by white people. Look, if I don't like somebody because of the color of their skin, I still don't have the power to affect their lives. You know what I mean? And that's the difference between what racism is, because racism is about power and about superiority. Look, as a Native person, many times we were told growing up, never trust a white person. Now that sounds like a really racist thing, but there's history behind it. There's a reason that we're told never to trust a white person. And
we're not trying to go to jail.
And whether we trust a white person or not, or don't trust a white person, we're not going to affect whether they get hired in a job. We're not going to affect whether they, can be successful in life. Most of the time, our resistance is something that is more inhibiting to us than to anybody else. But I will say we are winning this battle, and
yes, we are.
And by winning this battle, we gain a voice on all of the other issues. So anytime somebody calls me out and says, why aren't you fighting against this or this? I am fighting against all those other issues. I'm a prominent voice on everything from the residential school, Holocaust, from missing and murdered Indigenous women, all of the issues that we face, environmental issues. I fight all of those things. But the thing about this mascot issue is when you've marginalized us and you've cast us into the past, when you've dehumanized us and cast us off as relics of the past, then you'll never understand why are we trying to stop a pipeline in Minnesota? Why are we trying to stop a copper mine in New Mexico? Why are we trying to stop? You will never understand what the Native perspective is if you can continuously cast us off as relics of the past or simply a beheaded profile on the side of your football helmet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish we could keep talking. In fact, I'm like already thinking ahead. We should do another show where we just listen to you talk, or I will just encourage the whole audience to please go and check out John's radio show and webcast. Is that what you call it?
Podcast. Look,
podcast.
And you can
podcast.
well, you do it my radio show is put out as a podcast too. So if you look for Radio with John and Regan is my co-host on the radio show. You can find those shows or my podcast, which is a little bit more clearly produced because it's recorded and then put up. That's Let's Talk Native with John Kane. So you can find either one of those podcasts. But I also encourage people to go to my YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I do put up many of my podcasts as videos, even if they are more audio than they are video, so they are on YouTube. But if you scroll down on my YouTube channel, you will see the short form videos, and I've addressed everything from the doctrine of Christian discovery to gaming law to the mascot issue, Christopher Columbus. There's a whole list of things that I've covered in those YouTube videos, and they're short. They're like 5 or 7 minutes, so you don't have to listen to me talk for an hour.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you speaking up about this. And we would love to hear more from the other, from the Mohawk tribes themselves as we move forward. If this gets, if it becomes more of an issue, but in the meantime, you know, I'm glad that we were able to get your voice on here. So we'll keep in touch.
All right. Just a final note. Both St. Regis, which is a tribal council in New York, have condemned this, but the broader Grand Council, which is the Six Nations that includes the Mohawk Nation, the Haudenosaunee have clearly come out against this as well. So there's no way to work around what the Native perspective has been, and you know, so whether you're talking about the Native American Journalists Association, the NCAI, we have clearly come out against this in every legitimate Native organization that there is. So there's no ambiguity there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I am in this Mason City fight. So I sent in a letter to the editor. I don't know if it has been or will be published. You'll have to keep me informed. I have reached out to the superintendent in Mason City and offered my help, because clearly they had enough foresight to ban the mascot, and now are trying to figure out how they would stand the public pressure from a very racist knee-jerk reaction from the folks there.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
All right.
So, we're going a bit over time, but frankly, that's fine. I've scheduled this to go to 6:30. But I do want to say that we haven't had a lot of time to talk about the I guess we could call it the psychiatric, or what's the word I should use, Jess? What scientists are saying, basically, the studies that have been done. Studies have been done that have proven that the use of Indigenous mascots, racist Indigenous mascots, affect the psyche of young Indigenous people. That in and of itself should just be completely why we stop using them, period. And so I just want to make sure that everybody here knows that in and of itself is reason enough to stop using these. Besides just the whole, common decency to your fellow human being and not stereotyping them. I would love to bring Keely on here next. Hello, Keely. Sorry, we're running a little bit over. Thank you for waiting. Keely Driscoll is one of our youth organizers at Great Plains Action Society and Meskwaki. I'm here today to weigh in from that perspective, because the Meskwaki Nation recently wrote a letter on this issue.
Yeah, ho jagimoa kwenatishis Keely Driscoll natishis amukamani swan. I really was listening to what you were talking about the psychological effects of these mascots. And for the last few months, Alex and I have been working on pushing back against Iowa House File 802, which was also discussed. The last speaker was speaking on that a little bit. And so just to go back to that a little bit, because it does play a big role into, some of the compounding of these issues and how interconnected they are. In the legislation, it specifically says no one should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any form of psychological distress because of one's race or sex. And so I think it's important that we, call on Kim Reynolds and call on, get out to the polls in the elections and support, show our support for legislation that will, push back against this and allow for, the teaching of these things in our schools, because, mascots are kind of one of the first impressions that kids really get, because, there's not very good education in K through 12 schools. Mm-hmm. So, them seeing that, they initially get all of these implicit or explicit biases that they don't even know how to understand yet. And so that becomes the burden of young Native students in predominantly white institutions who have to kind of answer these questions or help other people who have been, not educated in the way that they should have been, filling those gaps. And so I really loved what our last speaker had to say about, it doesn't matter if one tribe or an Indigenous person does endorse these mascots. What it really is about is that they're inherently harmful, and there are studies, proving that. Yeah. So I'm going to now read a special message that was created to Iowa school teachers, school board members, and community members, signed by the Meskwaki Nation Tribal Council Chairwoman Judith Bender, as well as representatives from the Ponca Tribe of Nebraska, National Congress of the American Indians, and the American Indian Council. So the letter says, "We, the undersigned tribal nations and local and national Native organizations, call upon you, the 66 K-12 schools in the state of Iowa with Native-themed school mascots, to retire your mascots. With recent events casting a spotlight on the well-documented harms caused by race-based mascots and a corresponding increase in related discussions at the school district level, we believe it appropriate to share with you Indian country's long-standing opposition to the continued use of Native-themed mascots. The National Congress of American Indians, as the oldest, largest, and most representative national organization representing tribal nations and their citizens, has been leading Indian country's consensus-driven movement to eradicate offensive Native-themed mascots from sports and popular culture for more than 50 years. NCAI's resolutions, which present the unified voice of hundreds of tribal nations, have consistently conveyed Indian country's clear desire to see these mascots retired so that the schools our children attend may provide an inclusive, equitable, and supportive learning environment for all students. Critically, the formal position of the Sac and Fox tribe of the Mississippi and Iowa, the only federally recognized tribal nation in the state, is categorically against the use of Native American terms or images or symbols for sport or other marketing uses. Additionally, other federally recognized tribal nations, including the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, with ties to the state of Iowa, have taken similar positions against the use of Native American names, imagery, symbols, and customs as school mascots. So too have key Native organizations that serve Native people residing in the state, including the Iowa Commission on Native American Affairs. As the Meskwaki Nation has publicly addressed, if supporters of these mascots look hard enough, they will be able to find individuals who support their cause. However, when taken as a whole, the will of Indian country is clear. Native-themed mascots and the dehumanizing stereotypes that they perpetrate must go. Out of respect for tribal sovereignty, we ask you heed the voices of tribal leaders representing hundreds of tribal nations and the organizations that serve their citizens, not the voices of a few select individuals, when seeking to understand where Indian country broadly stands on this issue. To that end, we invite you to begin a dialogue with us so you can learn about contemporary tribal nations and peoples and why these mascots degrade us, misrepresent who we are, and dismiss the many important contributions we have made and continue to make to this great country. Moreover, know that we are committed to working with you to expand and strengthen the curriculum your schools teach future generations of Iowans about tribal nations and peoples, particularly the undersigned nations.
Thank you for reading that. So there you have it, everybody. Not only are the many Mohawk nations against, this mascot, the Meskwaki folks themselves, the closest Native nation to Mason City, have also said no. Period. There's no need to discuss this anymore, really. What do you think about that, Keely?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is long overdue, and it's just compounding ignorance that has led to this to be allowed to continue. Even the legislation that our state supports contradicts the ability for schools to be able to have this, and creating like non-inclusive environments for our diverse students. And so I really just hope that people in their communities come out and show support and push back against this.
Well, thank you, Keely. We're lucky to have you on board here at Great Plains because we got a good mind here that can continue to keep this fight going. Thank you for speaking, and I hope you have a good evening. And we're going to bring on a special added guest, Monape Lemire, one of my good friends who I didn't even realize was following this as closely as he was. And I saw him throughout the comments here this whole time. So I said, hey, come on, let's just talk. Let's get on the show. Let's talk about this. First, and before I hand it over to you, I just want to say NAGA is trash. Okay, everybody, like, let's just stop defending this organization that is obviously racist and really a joke. So I am going to hand it over to Monape now to provide some insight into his perspectives on this issue. Hello.
Oh, Matakapi, good to see you.
You too.
And, it was really great to hear the youth share what they shared, and really kind of makes my heart feel good to hear all those initiatives that they have and the way they carry themselves and the way that they're finding a voice for themselves and for their people. That's really uplifting. And the gentleman that spoke here with you last, some of the things that he shared were that made me feel good that there's people out there. You know, I need to get more connected with some of these radio shows and these video blogs. You know, it's good that he has those discussions and keeps those things going. My father had always said that that activism is elevating the discussion. And if you're an activist, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. You're going to be, people are going to tell you you're wrong. People are going to tell you you're right. But as an activist, your job isn't to prove that you're right or to disprove that you're wrong. Your motive is to make sure that they're talking about it at the local dive bar. Make sure they're talking about it that night at the dinner table, and so on. Maybe when they're playing 9 rounds of golf, you know, or get people talking about it. Don't worry about how they might belittle what you have to say. It's been happening to him for many, many years. And for those that don't know who my father is, his name is Frank Lemire, and he's been an advocate and a activist most of his life, and a politician. And when he wasn't doing politics, he was fighting issues like this. And he fought one right here in Sioux City, Iowa. And that's where me and my companion and my nephew live. And we'd played against different teams throughout our lives. My dad had a fast pitch softball team that was the greatest men's fast pitch team ever assembled. And we at least placed in the top 15 in the ISC World Tournament, which is a worldwide tournament. Teams come from all over, basically the Olympics of fast pitch softball. And throughout all that, I have to tell you a defining moment in my life. And that was back in the 1987 Nebraska Cornhusker season. Go Big Red. And we had got a ticket to a bowl game. I didn't have much growing up, but what my parents did like to do was save up just enough to go to go somewhere. So we would go on a little vacation somewhere. And that year we went to Tempe, Arizona, and we went, back then it was called the Sun Bowl, and or later known as the Fiesta Bowl. And we went down there and we were playing the Florida State Seminoles. This was in 1997, but the bowl game was New Year's Day of 1988. So I'd have been 9 years old when I went to that game, and it was Nebraska against the Florida State Seminoles. And at that point, I didn't even know who the hell the Florida State Seminoles really were. And I went and they were introducing the team, and then all of a sudden there were some drums. Half the stadium was, Nebraska travels well. Half the stadium was Huskers, and the other half was Florida. And these drums started playing. And then this warrior come riding out. We were way up in the nosebleed, but I could see. This warrior comes riding out on a horse, on a pinto, and on a paint, or whatever you want to call him. And then he stabs a spear in the ground, and all these people start doing the chop and doing the chant. And there were people right next to us. And I looked up, I was looking around, and I was like, what the hell? And I looked at Dad, and Dad just said, just don't pay him no mind, son. You know, try to enjoy the game, pay him no mind. You know, but my dad's been an advocate against those things for a long time. But when you're looking at 50,000 people versus you, just keep your head down. You know, that was a defining, that changed everything. I mean a lot of things in my life. How I perceive society, it changed me. And I don't want to go and blame all my problems on such moments, but I can't help but think of all the cynicism and the distrust. And a new lens was put in front of me at 9 years old, and that hasn't wavered much. So I come back from that trip, and I think about that. And even today,
did that affect you in a negative way?
Oh, absolutely.
So
I knew that was wrong at 9 years old.
There's somebody in here right now that is trying to say that the studies that have been done on the fact that this affects the Indigenous children's psyche in a negative way is not that great. It doesn't have a lot of merit to it. But I mean, we can just say, as Native people ourselves, our experience is that it is really bad for our psyche, even as adults. You know,
it's been happening for a few hundred years. You're always going to have sellouts. You're always going to have, if you look hard enough, you'll find an Indian that just loves the Kansas City Chiefs. You're going to find plenty of Indians that are going to love the Seminole mascot, Chief Nakahoma, Chief Wahoo. You know, you're going to find plenty of adults that, and I'm going to get to a point here. You're going to find plenty of adults that will sell out and support something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's because we're still dealing with colonization.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're always gonna deal with it.
Yep.
We're always gonna deal with colonization, you know. But here's my point. About 10 years later, Sioux City wanted to have a minor league farm team, baseball, and they were gonna go with the Sioux City Sioux, and one interpretation of that name, it was going to be SOO, and one interpretation of that name is what they call the pigs. You know, when they're calling in hogs. Suey, yeah. So, but my dad was like, well, then why do you need a Native American mascot? You know, because
combining the two was even worse.
Right? Yeah. See, and so they didn't understand, like, you're not helping your case here. So down the road, Dad got the name changed, and we put it to the city to vote on a name and create one. Mm-hmm. And they did that. They did that on the radio shows and on the TV channels and all that, you know. And throughout all that, my dad caught a lot of grief, and I caught a lot of grief because I was in high school at the time. So imagine me going to high school in this city when that sort of, and Dad's the enemy, right? So eventually, they decided on the Sioux City Explorers, and which you know, at some point, Dad became a huge fan. You know, he would go to practically every game, and you know, and for him to sit back and enjoy a soda pop and a hot dog and maybe some caramel corn or something, that's the biggest slap in the face to Sioux City. They don't get that, though. They don't understand that. I love it. That's like counting coup on them. Dad had Sioux City Explorer hats, you know. And so sometimes you may not like the name Explorer because it perpetuates colonization, but at the same time, that's your scalp. He earned that scalp. and he became an avid fan.
Yeah,
of the
Explorer is fine
Confederate
with me, to be
flag.
honest, because Explorer can mean a lot of different things. So
It could be. It could
Yeah.
be. That's right.
Well,
Well, I mean, their mascot was a guy in a coonskin hat. So I mean,
Yeah.
in a musket.
oh, okay. All right.
Right.
Well, that's a whole other.
But regardless, that dad counted coup on that, and throughout that whole time, we were also going to, I can't remember what year it was, but the Atlanta Braves were at the World Series playing against the Cleveland Indians, and I remember we went to protest that in Cleveland, and we were passing out pamphlets, and I remember a man spitting on my mom. A man spit on my mother. A group of people had surrounded, and they didn't do that to Frank. They did that to her. And I seen my father become unglued because these people are talking about honoring us, and they spit on my mother. And I've seen my dad throw down a few times. A lot of people like to talk about how all those good things, but they ain't never seen him throw down.
Those are good things too. Throwing down is not a bad thing either.
Hey man, he became unglued on that man, and it took several people to hold him back. And my mom was always graceful, and but even mom was red in the face, and myself, even myself. But regardless, people talk about honoring you, and here's my point. Here's the point that we got to get at. And because I always remember me arguing this thing, and I remember asking Dad, what is the ultimate point here? And he said, son, you were 9 years old when you experienced that, and you knew it was wrong. And I'm very confident that any kids that weren't familiar or not exposed to that chant or that chop, I'm sure those kids will look around and wonder, what the hell? What are they doing? And how does somebody explain that to those kids? And I think the biggest point my father was trying to make was, are they going to educate these children? Is the ballpark going to educate the children on this is how Indians are? Do we trust that? Do we trust that this school and the stadium is going to educate the people on this is what Indians are, and we're doing what Indians do? We can't trust that. This isn't about who's right or wrong between us adults. This is about making sure that kids have access to truth. Yeah. And somebody putting on, in one of my comments to that group, somebody proposed something about erasure. And I love the gentleman before he talked. This is the exact opposite. This perpetuates erasure, because this is not how Indian people are. We don't don our wife's lipstick and put on chicken feathers and chant nonsense. That is completely disrespectful. And I challenge any Mason City Mohawk, and I've heard my dad say this, I challenge anybody from one of these come and do that to my face.
Me too.
Come and do that to my face, because I don't ever see it when I'm around.
And they can do it to our face because we will be attending the school board meeting, so we will be there, so they can do that to our faces.
Right. Now the children of these people, if these family members are justifying this, then I would have to say that their children are being exposed to a level of education that is beneath me. It's beneath me. That is not how our people conduct themselves. And the Indian is telling you this. Like I said, they can go out and find all the sellouts that they want. And I don't understand in Indian country today how Indian people can support teams like the Kansas City Chiefs and others. It actually, I try not to put too much power into the NFL and the Major League Baseball, but but at the same time, I wonder what their kids think. And we're not using our intellect. They're not. And so if these families feel like they have to do this to preserve us, they're not doing us a favor. And that's part of that white supremacy, is they always think that they know what's best for us.
Mhm.
You know, in the fact of naming something, naming a mountain, naming a high school team, all of that is part of white supremacy.
Mhm.
You know, and I'd love to see. I don't think people understand the effect this has on children. And I would just simply say that my father's advocacy to change names always fell on that.
Mhm.
It didn't matter what he felt about it. It was, what about these young? He remembers how that affected me.
Yep.
And,
You know,
and I would
we're
love to
running-
take some kids.
We're
I would
running low
love to
on.
take some Indian kids to a game and
Yeah.
see how does
I'd
it make
rather
you
not
feel?
actually, because I don't want to expose them any more to this than we have to. But I would.
Yeah,
We're running
that's
out of time, and I would like to get to one more thing before we end this forum, and that is how much money is being made off of our likeness. We
That's
haven't
right.
even gotten to that topic yet. These corporate conglomerates, these high school teams with their merchandise, these schools, these systems, whatever they are making so much money off of this. And we have to ask, where is that money going to? I know there's been some partnership somewhere at some point that has given, some kind of, honorarium to nations where the likeness is being used. I'm guessing maybe the Blackhawks. I'm guessing maybe, I don't know. But let's be honest, like, this is going, most likely directly into the pockets of, school boards, and sole ownership of, like, these huge teams. It's not actually benefiting Indigenous people at all.
Yeah, no, it ain't, and it never will. And it's very easy for them to pocket. You know what? And any money that they do make off of that guilt comes in on its own, and they'll have somebody like the former Navajo Nation president show up and put him in box seats up at the Washington Redskins stadium, front row seat, or not front row, but those box seats, those really nice ones, and then really shower them. You're always going to find sellouts, and there's always going to be an Indian that'll take that money.
We're still decolonizing our minds. We're still dealing with a lot of trauma, that comes out in different ways. Either it is like you have, all sorts of, there could be mental illnesses, but then there could also just be like selling out. There are people that we called Fort Indians for a long time for a reason. Those are the people that stuck around and rubbed elbows with the invaders for the sake of surviving. And, in essence, that's kind of what's happening now with a lot of Indigenous peoples who are siding with the mascot. They just themselves have a lot of growing to do, and they're not woke yet as well. And that's we can't. The thing about that is, these people like Naga and all these people supporting these mascots keep turning to those people specifically to prove that what they're doing is okay. I've seen those comments.
I've seen some of the comments. I got blocked from that site today.
Me too. Yeah, they took me off. So, and
I noticed somebody said, I'm German, Norwegian, and Mohawk. How about all of you? And everybody in there was commenting, I'm Irish and Mohawk. Now they're ascribing this mascot to their own identity.
Well, yeah, it also, what it does is it perpetuates identity theft, and cultural, misappropriation, really, and what we call pretendians, right? It and that's my question I had for John earlier. I'm like, what is wrong with these people's identities that they have to, ascribe, they have to follow this and be that, like a Mohawk, more than they are like where they come from. And that to me,
I find the compassion in that. They're wanting to be connected. They want to be connected to something, but the way they go about it, there's a good way to do things, and then there's the other way, you know.
Yeah,
And
I would like to.
nobody has showed them culturally a good way to do these things.
No, they have not. I would love to point the audience out to pick up the book Playing Indian by Philip Deloria. Also, if you would like just a quicker way to digest that info, I host a radio show once a month on WORT. It's in Madison. And if you go to the 8 o'clock buzz, you can click on my profile there, and there's a radio show specifically called Playing Indian. It's the Playing Indian episode, and I did it for Halloween, and it'll give you like a really good history. Philip Deloria is on the show himself about why people are doing this, which we don't have time to get into here. But,
that's my cousin, actually, on my mother's side.
I know. Yes, because your Vine is your uncle, and
yep.
or like
grandpa.
Yeah, that's it. So I wish we could talk more, but we've been on here for an hour and 45 minutes. And we just do it their own native way, don't we, Monape?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Thank you for getting on here at the last minute. I really appreciate you taking the time. And, we're going to be there on December. I thought it was the 20th, and I saw Sunrose put in here. It's the 21st now. But Great Plains, we will be posting this information on our website. We would love people to be there with us. We would love the support. We want to go and support Leanne and Salvi, who have been fighting there for months now, if not more, 5 years, I think. We want to be there and to support the local Indigenous folks and allies that have been fighting. And then we want this to be an example of how, when white supremacy rears its ugly head and thinks that they can get their way, that there are strong Indigenous people in this state here that are willing to stand up for the truth and for what's right.
Yeah, that's right.
So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Ahai, kitata mahin. Please share this out. Please educate, people in your circles about what you learned today. And we look forward to doing our next one on Indianola. And we will talk to you later.